Welcome back to Brown Girls Money Moves, where we hear from South Asian women founders and the investors backing them. I'm your host, Bhargavi Varma. We all know that being a woman in venture capital isn't easy. But it's even harder when you're part of an all-woman founding team. That's why it's so impressive that Orca Fraud raised one of the largest seed rounds ever in the African continent, and why I'm thrilled to have Orca's co-founder Thalia Pillay join us today. Now, we're also being joined by Nivesh at Norskin 22, one of their earliest investors who led their most recent round as well. We covered things like the African tech ecosystem that's rapidly growing, what it means to offer work-life balance, and flexibility and the importance of that in the startup phase. We also talked about being capital efficient and how valuable that is for investors too. I hope you enjoy.
Thalia, at Brown Girl Money Moves, we always like to start with something celebratory. So you are coming off the back of raising another round, and a round in which Norskin 22 and Nivesh is here representing them, that they followed on as a second round. And I believe, and tell me if I'm getting the stat right, it is the largest round raised by an all-female founding team in Africa. Am I saying that accurately? And is that stat correct? And if so, I'd love to kind of just hear, how you just feel about that milestone and what does it mean to you?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having us. And also thank you for that video you made of us for our pre-seed round. I think my mom has it on a constant loop because it was so well made.
Does she?
Yeah, it's really cute. But our seed round actually wasn't the largest all African team in all female team in Africa. It was the second largest round, which is why I always say one of the largest rounds. I think we were off by 100K. So we definitely could have done it.
Still an accomplishment. Yeah. Still an accomplishment.
And I think our pre-seed round was the largest by all women founding team on the continent. And I think it is kind of sad that even though, we're really well venture backed, shout out to the Norskin 22 team and Nivesh, they're still not that large rounds if you rack them up against other rounds in Africa. A lot of the work you're doing here is really important to make sure that, we get more women funded, more women as entrepreneurs, and also more women at the growth stages. The round was awesome. Really, really grateful it happened such a long time ago. So I feel like it feels like a lifetime ago. We announced it recently, and I think we also announced it in a pretty unconventional way where we took Nivesh and a few others kayaking on the open waters. You can ask him how that went. I think it was a lot harder than you guys anticipated. And yes, something I'd recommend doing with your entire team from a accountability perspective.
These days we're seeing all kinds of videos for announcements, but that's the next level. Yeah, Nivesh, I have to ask about that. Are you whatever it takes to do the announcement, I am game? Or how was it when you first said this to you, Nivesh, that, hey, this is the idea?
Yeah, thanks, Bhargavi, for having me. Listen, that kind of just epitomizes Thalia and the team a bit loco. When they said, let's go to see some whales, because as you'll pretty quickly realize everything has got a whale reference, and I'll bet my house that Thalia will make at least 20 whale references on this call. She said, cool, we're going to go kayaking. Why don't you join us? It's the whole team. I said, cool, why not? Came there and nearly died. So I'm pretty glad that I made it out, and hopefully can still see the success that Thalia and Carla made.
Thalia, if there's another round, I cannot wait to see. Isn't South Africa where there's also shark diving? Not that I'm putting ideas in your head, but isn't that could maybe be the next one? I'm just saying. There's something you actually brought up, and it's something I want to touch upon because, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, there's still a bit of a black box around for so many people who haven't raised before, founders who haven't, and I think investors too, of what happens after you raise. The fact that you even mentioned that, it's already happened a while ago and we're announcing it now. If you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's something that surprised me a lot because, before Orca, I'd worked at two other startups. One was in agri-tech, one was in fintech. And then now baby Orca, where we're having a whale of a time. There's one pun for the record. You can have a sip of water every time.
Living for it.
But I don't think I realized that when people announce, it wasn't the moment they close. It's always very strategically timed with a few other things. So for us, even though we closed it in late 2025, we honestly just didn't have the capacity to even think about marketing it and announcing it. So it was really only when, we brought on a PR team, we brought on marketing experts, and then we were like, okay, we can make a splash with it. But yeah, I think in terms of how it went, it was really cool just to see the support from the community.
And Nivesh, can you also add some layering to that as well? Kind of how VC firms think about the timing of the announcement. Alluded to that, Thalia, about like the strategy around it. Can you give some broad strokes around that?
Yeah, for sure. I think to Talia's point, this is a pretty intense process to raise capital, so probably a little bit of fatigue in terms of it just getting done and not being able to kind of focus on celebrating it, although Thalia does well in kind of celebrating the small wins. But I think more importantly, what we talked about was the strategic kind of rationale around the announcement, right? Like something we always talk about at Norskin 22 with our founders is like celebrating a milestone of raising funding isn't really that strong, right? Like what is the benefit in celebrating that you've raised money? Like not to downplay how difficult it is, specifically in Africa and specifically for, all female teams that we've discussed, but, receiving money or on the opposite side, venture investors handing out money is not difficult, right? It's actually building a business, creating value, servicing customers, and then returning an outcome that's beneficial for everyone, which is much harder. So like the celebrating the milestone of raising money is not always the greatest thing, but what is good is like this generally gives you a lot of credibility, especially if you're an early stage founder. You're backed by some credible investors. You've got some money that can hopefully hire some people and deploy product, and therefore that should help you with customer acquisition and onboarding, as well as attracting good talent to the firm. So I think that's kind of the way we always think about how you strategize and think about this announcement more than the funding headline.
I think he's nailed it. Where, especially for me and Carla, my co-founder, our goal isn't to raise money, it's to fight fraud. So raising money is just a way to do that more effectively and at a larger scale and accelerate that. So we actually weren't even going to announce this latest round, but it was really to Nivesh's point around building credibility, being able to sign banks and telcos faster, because when you're a 2-year-old company going up against 50-year-old companies, you really need to use different things to your advantage.
I love that we're talking about this, and I'll say what's in kind of the pink elephant in the room, which is there's been a glamorization on social media a lot about this company raised this much, this company raised that much. And to your point, but to what end and why? And what can you attach to, if I can kind of paraphrase what you're saying, Thalia, it's a means to an end. But there's been this glamorization of almost like a linear relationship of the more you raise, the cooler it is, and the bigger the announcement. And that isn't exactly it. Let's start with actually where most of our conversations start, which is understanding the company. But we are called Brown Girls Money Moves, and we are from the diaspora. So we obviously are going to phrase this in a way that is relatable to you both and to the listener. You are at a dinner party that your mom has at the house, and an auntie comes up and says something that's completely off color and unsolicited. Most probably, you look like you're working too much, or you look like you haven't been sleeping. But by the way, I hear you're working on this thing that has to do with whales. Apparently, it's called Orca fraud. What is that? And how would you describe that?
It's actually a conversation I had with my mom today. And for context, both of my parents are doctors. So like for them, Fintech is just the wild, wild west. And even my gran called me recently and she was like, she saw Orca in the news and she was like, wow, Talia, I had no idea Orca was like the whale Orca. And then she saw us holding a massive inflatable whale and she was like, oh, this makes sense. But yeah, I think when it comes to my mom, even today, she admitted she doesn't really understand what I do, but she's very supportive, don't get me wrong. So she always refers all her friends who've been scammed and stuff to us. So I'm kind of their agony aunt. But I always explain it as, when a bank blocks a transaction or you've been defrauded and they block a transaction, that's really the work Orca is doing. So we stop different types of scams, different types of fraud. And I think the scary thing is throughout our 2 years or 24 months, we've just seen the rise of fraud. So it's becoming easier for people to understand what we do, especially with the rise of AI. So yeah, my mom, for example, her Instagram always gets hacked every year. So I'm like, Mom, this is the type of thing we'd take, which would be an account takeover. So it's very realistic for her.
And to your point, fraud is now part of the everyday water cooler conversation. It's part of the dinner conversation of just like, oh, I heard this happen to someone. So before we dive into, from a fintech point of view, what Orca fraud does, I'm being the agony aunt. Broadly, if you had to say, here's my opportunity to do the PSA of, folks, here's how you prevent fraud. What are like just top line things that you are sharing with someone listening, saying, oh, okay, I guess she knows her stuff, I better take this seriously? What would you say?
There's so many things. I also have so many horror stories as well. I saw a recent stat that in South Africa, for example, there's a data breach that happens every 3 hours. So the first thing I'd tell people is to assume all of your details and credentials are on the dark web. So, change those card details, or like stop your cards, rotate your cards, change your passwords. Also, don't reuse passwords, especially, a lot of people reuse passwords. Get a good password manager. But then one of the cooler things I've heard recently that people are starting to use, so Nivesh, for example, lives in Johannesburg, where there's quite a high prevalence of kidnapping. And what's really important there is to use a safe word with your family. They're trying to extort large sums of money from you and your family. So just knowing who you are through a safe word is really, really important. So there's really small things you can do in your daily lives to protect you and your loved ones.
I feel like those are broad. It's globally applicable, regardless of where you're listening from. And the safe word, I'm just thinking, the minute you said that, I mean, that's something I say with my son. It's like, hey, always have a safe word, because these days, AI impersonations of voices, you're hearing all kinds of things. So this is advice that's, I believe, is global. Nivesh, can we talk about Norskin 22? Can you just set the stage of the firm itself, what they invest in, and just kind of the thesis for those who aren't familiar with the Norskin 22?
I'll try and keep it simple. Norskin 22, we're a Pan-African venture fund investing into technology-enabled businesses across the continent. So from Cape to Cairo and Kenya to Nigeria. We are typically a growth-focused fund. So I would say normally writing checks from Series A onwards, and that's into businesses that have got proven product, proven customers, proven distribution, and are just looking for fuel to throw on the fire. But we do have a pool of capital that allows us to kind of invest at an earlier stage with exceptional founders in very topical kind of verticals that we're super interested in. That's exactly what we've done with Thalia and Carla and the team when we backed them at pre-seed and now at seed. Our team is based on the ground on the continent, so across 4 to 5 markets, from South Africa to Nigeria to Kenya to Ghana, and then we've got some of our senior team based in the Nordics. What's unique about us a little bit is that although we've got typical LPs who've invested in the fund, think family offices, DFIs, some corporates, nearly a third of our capital comes from successful tech entrepreneurs around the world. We call them our unicorn founders, built billion-dollar businesses. This is, co-founders of Klarna, of iZettle, of Mahjong. So pretty successful founders who've backed us, and they kind of lean in and support our portfolio companies with market advice, technology advice, and hopefully scaling.
And would you say that that these founders these exited founders, or broadly, actually, your LPs, it's for exposure to the African ecosystem? That would be one of the reasons why, perhaps, if not the only reason?
Yeah, listen, I think the diverse set of LPs have a diverse set of goals and objectives with their capital usage and allocation. But for sure, a large component of it is exposure to the African continent and what's happening here. I mean, many people say frontier in terms of growth opportunities across many sectors. Lots of stats around growing labor force, et cetera. So a lot of it is, cool, how do we get exposure to what's happening on the continent for us to further invest, for us to grow our businesses, for us to understand where there's opportunities to take some learnings from Africa to the rest of the world, and not only the other way around.
I was watching this presentation of yours, and you were saying it's rare for founders at an early stage to really understand what's needed for, Series A, B, and, C funding beyond. So bringing it back to specifically Thalia and Orca fraud, take us through, kind of that journey of, you kind of alluded to, well, here's why we invested the first time, but to follow on, kind of what was the rationale behind that, and how Norskin and how you thought about it?
No founder knows what's required to raise funding unless they've done it before, right? There aren't courses. You can tell me if I'm wrong. You've studied a very technical course at university. Did they tell you what it takes to raise venture funding? No, right? Like, there isn't a syllabus on this, right? And
right.
The requirements change by geography, they change by investor, they change by stage, right? So very difficult to understand. I think, the benefit of the earlier stage, like when we initially backed Thalia and Carla, was there's less data points that you can provide to prove a narrative. It's more around an opportunity that you're selling and why are we the right team to kind of execute on that opportunity, right? And that's what we've got at pre-seed. You've got Thalia and Carla telling us why they've got domain expertise, why they're a rock star team, and why they can really build this product. And here's the opportunity around how much fraud is actually occurring and why would we build that differently. That's effectively what the thesis was when we first invested, right? Thalia sitting at her kitchen table giving us cookies with no bank account company set up, right? There isn't anything else to really on. And that's the conviction was just on how strong Thalia and Carla were and why we thought they were the ones that would figure it out. Even if their business pivoted at some point in time, we thought that they were the right team to get involved with. So now we shift that a year and a half later, Thalia, to the seed round. I can't remember exactly. I think the narrative story is still super important, but now you've been going for 2 years, right? Like, cool, you should have some third-party or independent data to prove to us that what you said was the opportunity is the opportunity. What you said you were going to build, you've built, and that it's working because you can sign up some customers who are paying for this product at the end of the day. And that's effectively what happened, right? I think our conviction has only quadrupled or grown 5 times as kind of our check exposure has as well. It's just the team have proven that they know what they're doing, i.e. they know how difficult the problem is, that they can attract unbelievable talent on the journey to kind of help them grow the business and execute, because Thalia and Carla alone, despite the world of AI that we live in now, I don't think could execute on this by themselves without the people they've attracted to the table. And I think the ultimate litmus test was just inbound customers, right? They've got large multinational companies who have inbound reached out to the company to say, guys, we've heard about you. We've got massive fraud problems. Can you onboard us and can you help us solve this? And I think that's the ultimate litmus test. We spoke about this earlier, not being able to raise money, not even being able to hire people, not to have cool merchandise like Thalia and them have. It's about having customers who want your product, that you can sell the product and you can retain. That's really the only thing that matters. And that's where they are. So that's why we've been super excited. And that's why the conversation to back them again was pretty easy. I think the only thing that we struggled with was just, again, this is not really core focus for us. So it needed to be super exceptional opportunity for us to kind of be outside of our core mandate and continue to investing in them. And the feedback at the IC and our team was just all super, super positive. And that's kind of why we continue to back them. And hopefully we will continue to do so if they continue to do what they say they're going to do.
No pressure. But Thalia, this is, with Brown Girl Angels, we're talking, and we have a founder ecosystem that was thriving, that we're a part of. And these are questions that, pre-raise come up, that founders are, as much as they hear there's no template to do step A, B, C, and you are guaranteed raising this much. There's still kind of this, well, what did she do right? What were some of the things that, as even broad strokes, that she can say, guys, do this? And what would you say to a founder listening that, look, you want to go out as a first-time founder and you want to raise, get these things right? Kind of how would you address that?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and I think to your point, you can't really Google how to raise, and if you do, you're probably going to get a lot of advice based for Silicon Valley and not the African market. So for our example, Carla and I were in my house. We started Orca in Jan 2024. I did a LinkedIn post just to be like, hey, we're starting a fraud company. This is like our journey. It was kind of like a Dear Diary entry. It blew up to the point where we had like every investor and their aunt reaching out. I had no clue about raising money at the time. Nivesh was one of the investors who reached out with a few others. And I think, people were just so gracious to teach us everything we knew about VC, and especially Nivesh, like weird terms or people being weird. There's so much nuance to it. And you always hear broken cap tables, like the stuff of
Yes.
nightmares. So we've just had really great people around us from day one. And I think that's really helped us in our journey. And in our pre-seed round specifically, like we were super oversubscribed, even in the seed round as well. And I think as much as it's like an investor or VC fund doing IC on you, it's also about you selecting them. And we are fortunate enough to be really selective where, like 50% of our pre-seed cap table were
Yes.
women angels or women-led funds, which is super rare on the continent, but also globally. We brought in unicorn builders from the States, and just some of their advice was like so niche. It was like, Talia, if you want to have a child, have it between Series A and B. I'm not saying that's correct, but it was just very practical advice.
Yeah.
And I think
Someone who's kind of been down this road before.
and I think what really stood out to us about the Norskin team specifically and why we really felt like we connected with them as people was because, it was like global funding, but very local exposure, and they were on the ground. And just the quality of the portfolio as well, because it is growth stage companies, meant we got to learn from the best in the business. And I think, founder retreats, founder days, like we've really had exposure to some of the biggest names in Africa building right now. And I think Carla and I are just so grateful for the ability to learn from people who've made a lot of the mistakes we're making or we're going to make. But when it comes to learning the knowledge, everyone was like, run a process, but no one wants to tell you what that entails. And I think, just having a lot of intentionality around what you want to raise, why you want to raise it, having a good data room, all of those good things go a long way.
Fundamentals, right? Fundamentals, yes.
Fundamentals do go a long way, but then I think the building relationships portion is like the most important thing because especially the African VC ecosystem, everyone knows everyone. And I think even investors who didn't come into either round, like we have such strong relationships with them and they've been so helpful to us, even though they have no reason to be. So yeah, I think if you're willing to not just treat everyone as like a check or just a sum of money and actually be like, okay, we want to get to know you as a people, it's really just going to reward you and the business and then in turn be mutually beneficial.
Now, kind of moving into the running of Orca fraud, I read about you talking about being cash conservative and being capital efficient, and how that's very important. Can you expand on that and just kind of expand on like, the capital efficiency, the unit economics, and like this rapid growth that you've had over the past few years?
I think Nivesh is going to roll his eyes because he's one of our investors who's like, I think you and Carla need to spend more money. You're too capital efficient. And even after we raised our pre-seed round in May of 2024, it was still just me and Carla building up our house for the first year. Everyone expected us to go like on a hiring spree and get all the fancy merch and stuff, but we just wanted to build and find the right clients and design partners. Even now we're only 10 people, so our burn is still relatively low. We definitely could be spending more, and I think being conservative's been good in some ways, probably bad in others, so we're trying to find that right balance, that what we need to grow to get to the next phase. But I do think building in this age of AI, like it's cliche, but you are really able to do a lot more with less people. And Carl and I were lamenting last week in Cape Town, and we were like, wow, it was just so easy when it was the two of us. But I think, the team we've built is amazing, and I think they're all crushing it in their respective ways. But I don't think we're building a company of 100 people. Like I think we're building the Avengers, so we only really want 12 to 20 people. And making sure they're the right people and sustainably and don't burn out is like our core goal as founders.
Nivesh, take us behind the scenes of these discussions that you've clearly had and kind of what some of these discussions have been around this. So let us in on this stuff.
Talia is correct. Normally we struggle with founders being, let's say, overly optimistic and aggressive with the amount of cash that's in their bank account. And how they choose to spend it. Listen, this is part of the game, right? Like to be a venture-backed business, the expectation is you grow significantly faster than alternative businesses and therefore you can reach a sizable outcome much faster than investing into a traditional business. So that is the underlying fundamentals of being venture-backed.
Yes.
However, how you spend money needs to correlate to the purpose of the business, right? Servicing customers and getting getting their revenue / money for the service you provide. So Thalia and Carla have always, I liken it to, they've treated the money they've raised as if it's their money or the money that their parents have given them, because they've been very conservative in how they spend it, which is good, right? Like, that's kind of how we hope as investors, if our founders treat the cash, that it's not just free money that can be burned. So yeah, Thalia and Carla have been super conservative to the point where we've had to push them into say, guys, like, in order to test a lot of your hypotheses, in order to figure out, can you grow faster, can you convert customers quicker, are you missing some talent that will allow you to broaden your headspace to focus on other things, like, you can start spending the money. So I think that's what Thalia is talking about, right? There is a balance, and that balance is different for the founding team, for every company, for every situation. And it's not easy to find, right? Like, Thalia, maybe you can add, but I don't think you have the perfect balance right now. And I don't think you ever will have the perfect balance. And we've got billion-dollar Series C companies in our portfolio who equally don't have that balance, and that balance also shifts over time and challenges you have. But I think fundamentally, like, to be a good founder, right, you need to treat the money as if it's not a tap that's overflowing and will always be there, because that's not the truth. And secondly, you need to use every dollar to bring in incrementally more dollars, right? And that comes down to the unit economics question. Like, you can only spend as much as technically comes in, and that's for unit economics. It needs to be multiples of what comes into your bank account is what you should be able to spend. And I think, it's difficult in the age of AI when you're seeing, billion-dollar packages for a single employee, and that being the norm in the US, and you figuring out, like, what is the equivalent for me. But I've always found, like, the best founders that we've engaged with, the best founders that
so true.
we have in the portfolio, take a very microscopic view of their business in isolation, regardless of what's happening, competitors, markets, or around them, right? And, like, what the social norm is. They know best around their business and what it takes cost-wise and resource-wise to kind of reach their goals. So I hope Thalia and them continue, but still quickly get to a very sizable outcome.
All I have to say to this is that there's an auntie out there who's really appreciative of your cash conservatism. If she might not know the phrase capital efficient, she's really happy, and she just wants to know if there's also discounts that you're getting. I'm not really sure where and how, but I know that that's a question she's asking. So let's kind of now talk about something that anyone who's not familiar broadly with the difference in something that you talk about, which is risk being contextual in emerging markets. I think there's a lot of people who don't really understand what you mean when you say that. So can you touch upon, what do you mean risk is contextual? Why is it different in one market to another?
It's definitely the hypothesis we had when we started Orca, and it's been the common theme in everything we do, where we felt that risk was contextual or is contextual. And ultimately, our hypothesis was that fraud in Africa looks different. So, when we were pitching to Nivesh and his team at my kitchen table over cookies, we really were painting this picture of why.
I love that, by the way. I love that. I love that visual.
So fraud in Africa looks different for two reasons. And the first one is the different payment methods. So, we've seen the rise of mobile wallets in markets like Kenya, but we haven't seen the same rise in fraud and compliance tools. And then in the second part, just very different socioeconomic climate. The way users are interacting with money in Zambia is very different to the way they're sending money in Canada. So it's been really cool for us to get to chat to some of the best US vendors in the world. Like, even today, we made like top 50 companies in the FinCrime space globally. And, we know a lot of the US vendors on that list, and they're always like, wow, Thalia, like, fraud in Africa is just so different. It's so risky. And I think a lot of that conception comes from, people just don't have the data into Africa. So our biggest challenge at Orca has really been around, where do we source data from? Is the data clean enough? We get businesses inbounding to us who, their data is not digitized, so their onboarding flow will be WhatsApp and a dream. So there's very little ML and AI you can do with that. So we really put in a lot of the data processing ETL layer side to ingest the data. And like
Right.
shout out to my co-founder Carla, but she's always holding down the fort constantly. And I think a lot of other companies, like the markets just aren't big enough to justify them spending all of that time on the ground here. Whereas for us, we're now fighting fraud in I think more than 70 countries, all in emerging markets. So the data we have is incredible, and I think even now we're just waking up to just what we can do with the data, which is like super,
Wow.
super exciting.
About to use my one whale pod reference that I wrote down, which is that Orca's key values are around embracing a pod mentality. Why am I not able to say it without laughing? But all jokes aside, how you run the company culture, and you do talk about this, about kind of your core values around that, and that it is about that you aren't pushing hustle culture and that flexibility does matter. So could you talk about now with this lean team of what's the company culture like and how you run the team?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, like I said, I'd worked at two different startups in South Africa before, and especially as a software engineer, we were doing midnight deploys. We were on call 24/7. I wasn't sleeping for days. I mean, I'm still not sleeping now, but like at least it's my own choice. But I think when Carl and I created Orca, the first objective was to fight fraud in emerging markets, but then the second objective was to build the company culture we always wish we'd had. And very rare to have like all women founding teams or even one woman on your founding team. And I think it's led to a very different company where it's naturally diverse. The maternity, paternity policies are really, really inclusive. And Carl and I are super aligned that this needs to be sustainable for everyone. So there's very few times anyone's working after hours. One of our engineers actually said it was like the best work-life balance he's ever had, which was awesome. Yeah, and I think even in
That's a
our
huge
seed round, it
compliment.
was like a super touching moment. I even shared with Nivesh, like one of our engineers was like, I actually want to invest my own money into the company. And I think it really shows how when you take care of your employees or the pod as we call them, they really, really
Wow.
care about what they do. And I think they really love working at Orca, I hope. And we do like free lunches. We're in the office 3 days a week. So there's like a bunch of perks that we have. But really, it comes down to having very achievable outcomes and making sure they don't change constantly. And just having recognition. Like Nivesh said, I love celebrating the small wins. Like we celebrate everything at Orca. Um, so I think the team's just been amazing. But really, Carla, specifically her, like, we're really trying to make sure everyone has the best time and becomes like the best version of themselves.
I would be remiss to not ask about something that is what feels like an obvious question, which is you're a woman in tech, building in fintech. As you alluded to, that's not, we need to see more. Let's just word it that way. What has been your journey? And I say this because I think I hear you say this about like just to women founders, stay in it, stay in the game. And
Yeah.
so were there times where you've had an adverse reaction or something that you felt was, out of color, let's call it? Like, how have you pushed through that? And I think that's something a lot of founders want to hear, which is just that experience, especially when you're in verticals that are male dominated.
But I really did mean, you need to persist and endure because I've been doing the study into like where do all the women founders in Africa go? And we're seeing such a massive drop off at the growth stages, and maybe Nivesh can comment on it in a bit. But between when I started the study last year to this year, like 3 of the 9 founders I had down are no longer at the growth stages. So I think, just as an ecosystem, we really need to be figuring out why it's not sustainable to stay in it. I mean, similar to my fraud war stories, I also have many VC horror stories as an all-woman founding team. We've been really lucky where like we've been oversubscribed and been able to select our investors. So no one on our cap tables like this, but in our pre-seed round, we had some investors say they'll only invest if we had a male co-founder, which was crazy because I think they just wanted me to pick someone up on the side of the road and add them to the founding team. Um, and then even in this last round, someone
Yeah.
recently came to me and they were like, "Oh, it must have been so easy for you and Carla. You just got some grant funding." And I think like grant funding is also an amazing thing, but I think people just think women have it a bit easier because there's like women dedicated funds and all of this like impact stuff. Um, But yeah, it was just a bit annoying because I think we want to be the best at what we do, irrespective of who we are. And I think a lot of people get threatened by that a lot of the time. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're doing great work. So that's the only thing that matters.
And I think there's this struggle sometimes that those cannot coexist, whereas they can. It is this and that. It doesn't have to be this or that. Before we kind of end off, I mean, VC, building, operating, these are heady topics, but we have to remember that, as we've talked about, there's people behind it. There's real lives that are being lived outside of this. So I'd love to talk about that a bit. Nivesh, I believe you're a first-time parent. Am I right to say that?
That's correct.
Fatherhood. Congratulations, first of all. How does that inform what you do for a living?
Yeah, thank you. It's like probably the most fundamental shift or pivot in one's life. You all of a sudden realize what's important and also what your human capability actually is. I make this joke, like most venture investors always look at, successful founders. Is this your second venture? As like a litmus test on success. I add a dimension now. If you're a parent and you're running a tech startup, like I think that is an incredible litmus test of your ability to be resilient and deal with challenges and operate at the limit. It's changed a lot for me. I think probably the key area that it's changed is just how ruthless I've become with my use of time, because I think now I realize that everything I do in terms of not spending time with my son is an opportunity cost, right? So like I'm always making the decision now, is this a good use of my time? Is there a better way for me to do this? Or is this actually something I should be doing? Where before, not at all, right? It was kind of work, this is important. And now that's not really the case. So like I'm sure most founders go through this every day. It's given me a little bit of EQ because I've never been an operator. So I'm an imposter. So it's given me a little bit of like context on how difficult it could be being a founder in terms of making decisions where everything's got an opportunity cost, right?
You're now a co-COO of a person's life. I mean, that's the way I've always said it.
He has not appointed me though, so maybe he'll.
Thalia, is it true you play 6 different instruments?
Yeah, that is true. That's actually crazy that you know that. But yeah, I do play 6 different instruments. It was funny when instead of studying robotics at university, I was initially going to study music, but I'm not actually that good, which is why I play so many, because I haven't really specialized in any one. And then in our first year of Orca, we were kind of working for free to avoid the cold start problem, where you need data to have good machine learning insights. And Carla's a trail runner, so we were going to make her like a professional trail runner, get her some like Adidas sponsorships. And then for me, I was just going to play weddings, and that was going to be like our 2 revenue streams. Neither super compatible, but really fun.
I love that.
But yeah, I do play 6, and it's funny, at Orca we have an orchestra now. Like one of our new hires, he also plays the ukulele.
Oh, come on with the Orca and orchestra. Come on. I mean, you're
I
too
have
good.
so much time. But yeah, so we have like a full orchestra now, and we have a karaoke machine. So it's really fun. It's a lot.
Wow. I actually think there is an intersection, and it's worth exploring, between founders who also have this creative pursuit. I was talking to another founder, also in fintech, and if you don't know each other, I need to introduce you. Ashi Agarwal from Cobalt Labs, and she's also a classical Indian dancer on the side, and I think there's some kind of other side of the brain that you're flexing,
I
that
also
one
used
informs
to
the other,
dance a
wouldn't
bit,
you
but
say?
also like I was way too old as well. Like it was like hip hop in high school. Like it's really bad videos of me on YouTube with my crew. But yeah, I definitely do think there is quite an overlap between, founders who are musical or just founders who have some other hobby they're super passionate about. But I think that passion like bleeds into a lot of things. Like Carla, like I said, is a trail runner. So her weekend was spent running 100 kilometers, which is, takes a special type of endurance to do that. Yeah, no, she's a real runner. Yeah.
Oh, she's a runner. Like,
Yeah, but
that's
I think
next
like at the
level. She's
bottom
not a
there, you
weekend
also need to have
5K
that
runner. Oh
resilience. So
my.
anytime someone's like, "Oh, are you resilient?" I'm just like, "Yeah, Carla's
Incredible.
like the most resilient person I know."
But it's true because it really, I mean, at those distances, it really is saying something about all the things that make a great operator, like the resilience, the pushing through pain. I mean, come on, like yeah, I mean that list is long and deep. So that's incredible. We always close out the episode. We are called Brown Girls Money Moves after all, to pay it forward with a shout out of a brown girl in your life, a founder or a product you use or someone you've been following whose company that you're impressed with. I'd love for each of you to give a shout out to that person. Share what it is.
Sure, I have two in mind, both brown girls in South Africa who are both
Love it.
co-founders of great fintechs. One's Henah from Little Fish. She's in Cape Town now. I was chatting to her just before this. They just raised their round as well, and I think we're both doing hard stuff working with banks. And then she's also an angel investor into us as well, so it's kind of full circle. And then the other one's Miranda from Scale. She's just been super helpful to us. They also do card issuing. They just announced a partnership with MasterCard. And I think really cool to be like three women all selling to banks and telcos and just, proving to each other that it's doable and easy and you can have fun doing it as well.
Incredible that you guys have that connection through, well, investing and just also a support group for each other. I mean, you do want to build alongside a community. I mean, this is one of the joys of it. Nivesh, what about you?
Slightly different angle to it than Thalia, because there's great women brown girl founders out there on our continent. But I'll do a shout out to my sister. Her name is Denisha Patha. She is a founder and CEO of a physiotherapy business based in Johannesburg called PhysioWorks. She started the business from scratch, had no business skills. I still don't think she has business skills, but she's an incredible founder and physiotherapist specializing in neurophysiotherapy, so anything neuro-related. And she's a mom and she runs this business full time. So incredible, relentless founder in the sense of a service business, not necessarily technology.
For a brother to shout out publicly and say, "Hey, this is the person of choice that I want to amplify," you're a good brother, but that dig somewhere in there had to be part of it. Otherwise, it would just not fit. I have a brother too, so yes, I would have done the exact same thing. I'm like, I'll give a little, but I also got to dig a little. Well, thank you both for this fantastic conversation and introduction into the African tech ecosystem at large, but also it's just so important for female founders broadly to see women building in verticals that they might not even know that women are building in, and I think that's so important. So thank you for this. Thank you for doing what you do as you really solve a problem that end of day really comes back to the everyday person that is impacted by it. Like, I mean, that's really at the crux of this all, that there's the everyday person who's like, oh, thank God someone's solving this problem.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
For more insights around angel investing, South Asian female founder stories, and belonging to a community that builds and funds brown girl businesses, join the conversation online at Brown Girl Angels. As always, thanks for listening to Brown Girls Money Moves with me, Bhargavi Varma.